Brentwood, one of Los Angeles' most exclusive, serene enclaves. A place of manicured lawns, towering privacy hedges, and celebrity residence. On the evening of June 12, 1994, it was the picture of calm. But just after 10 p.m., that calm would be shattered by a discovery so brutal. It would ignite a legal and cultural firestorm that would grip a nation for years to come. Nicole Brown Simpson, the charismatic ex-wife of football legend O.J. Simpson, had just returned home from dinner with her family. Ronald Goldman, a 25-year-old waiter and aspiring model, was on a simple errand returning a pair of eyeglasses left at the restaurant where he worked. Their paths crossed at 875 South Bundy Drive. And there, outside Nicole's condominium, in a walkway once trod by her two young children, a scene of unimaginable violence unfolded. The bodies were discovered shortly after midnight by a neighbor walking her dog. The response was immediate. Police descended, cordoning off the area. The early reports were grim. Both victims had suffered multiple vicious stab wounds. Nicole was found just inside the gate. Ron Goldman's body lay nearby, suggesting a fierce and desperate struggle. Homicide detectives, led by LAPD's Detective Tom Longa, arrived to a puzzle written in blood. The attack was frenzied, personal. This wasn't a random act. The question immediately began to echo through the crisp Brentwood air. Who could have committed such a savage act? And why? As detectives fanned out, speaking to shocked neighbors and piecing together the victim's final hours, a name began to surface. A name familiar to every American. A name tied to Nicole by a deep, complex, and tragically volatile history. The investigation was only hours old, but it was already turning toward one man. The evidence at the scene was one story. But the history between Nicole Brown Simpson and her famous ex-husband told another, a story of love, fame, jealousy, and documented violence the police had seen before. And as they looked at the carnage at Bundy, they realized this wasn't just a murder investigation. They were now staring into the explosive heart of a celebrity dynasty torn apart. To understand why the investigation turned so quickly, you have to understand the man at the center of it all. Orenthal James Simpson, O.J., wasn't just a suspect. He was an American icon, a Hall of Fame NFL running back, a charismatic actor and broadcaster, one of the most famous and beloved black celebrities in the country. But behind the gleaming smile and the juice persona was a different man known all too well to the LAPD. And, most tragically, to Nicole Brown. Nicole and O.J.'s relationship began as a fairy tale in 1977. They married in 1985 and had two children, Sydney and Justin. But the fairy tale had a dark, violent undercurrent. The police were called to their Rockingham estate multiple times. The most infamous incident occurred on New Year's Day, 1989. Police arrived to find Nicole terrified, hiding in the bushes, wearing only a bra and sweatpants. She had visible injuries. Simpson was arrested. The photograph from that night, Nicole's bruised and frightened face, became a haunting prelude. Simpson ultimately pleaded no contest to spousal battery. It was a misdemeanor. He paid a fine, did community service, and the world largely moved on. But Nicole didn't. Nicole knew the danger. She began to meticulously document the abuse. She kept a diary. She took photographs of her injuries. She wrote letters predicting, in chilling detail, that O.J. would one day kill her and get away with it because of his fame. Just days before her death, she had called a shelter for victims of domestic violence, expressing fear for her life. So when detectives at Bundy learned of this history, their focus had a direction. Where was O.J. Simpson on the night of June 12th? He claimed he was home, alone, at his estate just a few miles away on Rockingham Avenue. waiting for a limousine to take him to the airport for a flight to Chicago. But the timeline was tight. The alibi was solitary. And as they prepared to go and speak to him, as a courtesy to a grieving ex-husband, they said they would make a detour. A detour that would uncover the first piece of physical evidence linking Simpson directly to the crime scene. Before they even reached O.J. Simpson's front door, detectives would find something in the alley behind his mansion. Something dark, something dropped. It was a single left-handed leather glove, wet with what appeared to be blood. And across town, they already had its match. The connection was made. But could they prove it led back to the man inside the house? In the early hours of June 13th, behind O.J. Simpson's estate on Rockingham, Detective Mark Fuhrman, the name that would later become infamous in its own right, made a critical discovery. A single dark leather glove soaked through. It was a unique style, made by Aris Izutner. It appeared to be a left-handed glove, and it was stained with what looked unmistakably like blood. Across town, the other glove of the pair was lying near the feet of Ronald Goldman. The match was perfect. The implication was staggering. Had the killer, in a panicked or injured state, dropped this crucial piece of evidence while fleeing back to Simpson's own property? The focus intensified on Simpson's white Ford Bronco. In its interior, detectives found what they believed to be blood spots. More droplets were found on the driveway at Rockingham, leading from the Bronco to the front door of the house. This apparent trail suggested someone bleeding had entered the home. Then, detectives began deconstructing Simpson's alibi. A limousine driver, Alan Park, was scheduled to pick Simpson up for a red-eye flight to Chicago at 10:45 p.m. Park testified he arrived early and, seeing no one, repeatedly buzzed the intercom. He got no answer for over 30 minutes. Finally, just after 11 p.m., a large shadowy figure Simpson emerged from the darkness at the side of the house, entered the home briefly, and then came out with his bags. Simpson seemed agitated, in a hurry. He offered no explanation for the delay. To investigators, this window of time was more than enough to commit the murders at Bundy and return home. Then came the question from detectives. What happened to your hand? Simpson claimed he cut his left middle finger in Chicago after hearing the news of Nicole's death, breaking a glass in his hotel room. But the limo driver would later testify he saw a bandage on that finger before they left for the airport. And the Chicago police found only a tiny speck of blood in the hotel bathroom sink. The amount of blood at Bundy, at Rockingham, and in the Bronco suggested a much more significant wound. The evidence was mounting. The matching gloves, the blood trail, the shaky alibi, the unexplained cut. For the LAPD, the circumstantial case was solidifying into what they saw as a rock-solid forensic one. They had enough for an arrest warrant. They instructed Simpson's lawyer, Robert Shapiro, to have his client surrender by 11 a.m. on June 17th. But as that hour approached, Simpson wasn't at his lawyer's office. He was gone. And what happened next would transform a murder case into a surreal, live televised national event that no one who saw it would ever forget. June 17th, 1994. 11 a.m. came and went. O.J. Simpson, now formally charged with 2 counts of murder, did not surrender. Instead, his lawyer, Robert Shapiro, stood before a bank of microphones and delivered a shocking statement. Simpson had not shown up. He had vanished. The LAPD had a warrant, and now they had a fugitive. Police swarmed Simpson's empty mansion. Theories flew. Had he fled the country? Had he harmed himself? The nation was glued to its television sets. Then, a tip came in. Simpson's friend and former teammate, Al Collings, was driving him in the now infamous white Ford Bronco. They were on the freeway, and they weren't running. They were driving, What unfolded was one of the most bizarre spectacles in American history. A low-speed police chase, broadcast live to an estimated 95 million viewers. For over 2 hours, Collins drove the Bronco, with Simpson reportedly in the back seat holding a gun to his own head. Police followed but did not intervene, treating it as a fragile suicide prevention operation. The public reaction was deeply divided in real time. To some, it was the tragic flight of a man driven to despair. To others, it was the performative act of a guilty man evading justice. The chase ended back at Rockingham, where a negotiated surrender finally took place. O.J. Simpson was taken into custody. Exhausted and emotional, with Simpson in jail, the state of California began assembling its case. They assigned 2 fierce prosecutors, Marcia Clark, a seasoned veteran with a perfect conviction record, and Christopher Darden, a respected attorney from within the LAPD's orbit. They faced a defense team that was quickly being called the Dream Team. Led by Shapiro, the defense boasted legal superstars. But it was the addition of Johnnie Cochran that changed the game. A charismatic and brilliant attorney with deep roots in the LA community, Cochran understood not just the law, but the theater of the courtroom. The stage was set for a legal battle of epic proportions. The prosecution was confident. They had what they called a mountain of evidence: the blood, the gloves, the timeline, the history of abuse. It seemed like an open and shut case. But the Dream Team wasn't planning to climb that mountain. They were planning to demolish it, brick by brick, by putting the LAPD itself on trial. And their first, most powerful weapon was already in hand. The man who found the glove? Detective Mark Fuhrman. January 24th, 1995. In a downtown Los Angeles courtroom, under the watchful eye of Judge Lance Ito, the people of the state of California v. Orenthal James Simpson began. Dubbed the trial of the century by a ravenous media, it was more than a murder case. It was a live-streamed drama about race, fame, police power, and domestic violence. For the prosecution, it was about 2 victims. For the defense, it was about a frame-up. The strategies were set. Lead prosecutor Marcia Clark would present a timeline so tight and forensic evidence so overwhelming that the jury would have no choice but to convict. Her opening statement was a detailed scientific roadmap of guilt. Focusing on the blood trail, she said, led from Bundy to Rockingham to the defendant. The evidence will show that the person who left his blood at Bundy and left the blood of his victims in his car and at his home is the defendant, O.J. Simpson. Johnnie Cochran's opening for the defense was a masterclass in narrative. He acknowledged the tragedy, but told the jury they were about to see a different crime: the corruption of the justice system by a racist police officer bent on framing a black celebrity. You have to be vigilant. You have to watch. Because something is wrong here. We will prove that there was a rush to judgment, that evidence was tampered with, that evidence was contaminated. At the heart of this narrative was Detective Mark Fuhrman. The defense positioned him as the villain, a rogue cop who found the bloody glove at Rockingham, not by chance, but by design. They hinted he was a racist who had planted the glove to seal the case against Simpson. The prosecution fought to keep Fuhrman's controversial past out, but the door had been cracked open. And then there was the jury. Sequestered for what would become 265 days, they were the most analyzed people in America. Their demographics, predominantly African American women, became a constant topic of debate. Could they be fair? The question itself revealed the deep racial fissures the trial was exposing. The prosecution began calling its witnesses, building what seemed like an impenetrable fortress of science. Criminalists presented DNA evidence, a technology still new to many jurors, tying Simpson's blood to the crime scene and the victim's blood to his Bronco and home. It was modern, it was precise, and in the prosecution's view, it was irrefutable. But the Dream Team had a plan. They wouldn't attack the science itself. They would attack the hands that collected it. And when the prosecution called its star forensic witness, the defense would launch an assault that would make the entire world lean in. The prosecution's case was built on a foundation they believed was unshakable: forensic science. In a series of methodical presentations, they laid out what Marcia Clark called the mountain of evidence that placed O.J. Simpson at the heart of the crime. The blood evidence formed 3 incriminating trails. Trail 1. Simpson's blood was found at the crime scene, a drop near the victim's feet, and blood matched to him on the famous rear gate at Bundy. Trail 2. The blood of both victims was found inside Simpson's Ford Bronco, on the console and door. Trail 3. A trail of blood drops, proven to be Simpson's, led from the Bronco parked at Rockingham up to his front door. Then, the gloves. The right-hand glove, soaked in the blood of both victims, found at Bundy. A left-hand glove, stained with Simpson's blood and the blood of the victims, found at Rockingham. Fiber and hair evidence linked them to Simpson and the Bronco. For the prosecution, this was the murder weapon. Discarded by the killer Dot, the custodian of this mountain was the LAPD's criminalist, Dennis Fong. For 9 days, he detailed the collection, preservation, and chain of custody for over 150 pieces of evidence. He was the prosecution's guide through the forensic fortress, and his testimony was meant to be dry, factual, and bulletproof. But the defense had a secret weapon they'd held in reserve. Barry Scheck, a co-founder of the Innocence Project, Scheck was a pioneer in attacking shoddy forensic work. He wasn't a flashy courtroom performer like Cochran. He was a meticulous, relentless technician. And as Dennis Fong finished his direct testimony, Scheck approached the podium. The defense was done talking about conspiracies for now. It was time to dissect the mountain, piece by tiny piece. What followed was a brutal, days-long cross-examination that would change the entire temperature of the trial. Barry Scheck didn't yell. He asked simple, precise questions. About a missing vial of Simpson's blood. About a blood sample collected in a non-sterile envelope. About a blanket taken from Nicole's condo that might have contaminated other evidence. With each question, a single, devastating suggestion was implanted in the jury's mind. What if this mountain wasn't built by nature, but by human error? Or human design? For 4 days, defense attorney Barry Scheck conducted a surgical strike. His cross-examination of criminalist Dennis Fong wasn't about yelling "frame up." It was a quiet, devastating lesson in reasonable doubt, built on 1,000 small cuts. Scheck's first major thrust: a missing 1.5 milliliters of O.J. Simpson's reference blood. The prosecution had taken a vial of Simpson's blood after the murders to compare to crime scene samples. But the vial in evidence now contained less blood than when it was drawn. Where did it go? Barry Scheck asked. Mr. Fong, this blood was in the custody of Detective Philip Fanatter, correct? He carried it in his pocket for hours before booking it into evidence. And during that time, over a milliliter, enough to plant evidence across a crime scene, went missing. Do you have an explanation? Next, Scheck attacked collection procedures. He got Fung to admit that a blanket from Nicole's condo was used to cover her body at the scene, then later used to collect other evidence, risking cross-contamination. He highlighted how blood samples were collected in non-sterile packaging and stored in a hot police van for hours, potentially degrading the DNA. The impact was profound. Scheck never had to prove the blood was planted. He only had to prove it could have been. He turned the LAPD's own protocols against them, transforming meticulous police work into a story of sloppy, compromised procedure. For the jury, the pristine mountain of evidence now looked eroded, unstable, with the forensic foundation cracked. The defense returned to its core narrative: the corrupt, racist cop, The stage was now set for their most controversial and dramatic move. They had subpoenaed tapes, hours of interviews between Detective Mark Fuhrman and a screenwriter, made years before the murders. The prosecution fought to keep them out, but Judge Ito ruled portions could be heard. The defense was about to put the LAPD itself on trial. What was on those tapes was so explosive, the jury would be sent out of the room to hear it first. The prosecution's star detective, the man who found the critical glove, was about to be exposed not just as a liar on the witness stand, but as something far worse. And when the jury finally heard his own voice, the entire case would pivot on one unforgettable, theatrical moment in the courtroom. Before the defense could unleash the Fuhrman tapes, they orchestrated what would become the single most iconic moment of the trial. Prosecution attorney Christopher Darden, against the fierce advice of his colleague Marcia Clark, made a fateful decision. He asked O.J. Simpson to try on the bloody leather gloves in front of the jury. Christopher Darden said, "The people ask that the defendant be asked to try on the gloves recovered at Bundy and Rockingham." It was a huge gamble. Darden believed it would show the gloves fit, delivering a visual knockout punch. But the gloves had been soaked in blood, frozen and thawed for testing. Leather shrinks. And Simpson, perhaps anticipating this moment, appeared to be wearing latex gloves underneath and made little effort to force his hands. I know, J. Simpson said, "They're too tight." The visual was devastating for the prosecution. The gloves did not slide on easily. In that silent, stretched-out moment, a cornerstone of the state's case seemed to crumble. Johnnie Cochran said, "You have seen this demonstration. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." Cochran had just given the jury their mantra. A simple, unforgettable rhyme that reduced a complex forensic case to one powerful image, the glove that didn't fit. Then came the Fuhrman tapes. With the jury out, the courtroom listened to the detective's own voice. Recorded between 1985 and 1994, using the N-word over 40 times, bragging about fabricating evidence, and speaking of brutalizing minority suspects. The man who had testified under oath that he had not used that racial slur in a decade was exposed as a liar and a bigot. When the jury heard the relevant portions, the defense's narrative was complete. A racist cop, caught in a lie, who had access to Simpson's missing blood and found a glove in an improbable place. The Dream Team had successfully shifted the trial's question from, "Did O.J. Simpson kill two people?" to, "Can you trust the LAPD?" The prosecution gave a passionate closing argument, begging the jury to focus on the victims, Nicole and Ron. Cochran gave a spellbinding finale, framing the case as a civic duty to stop police corruption. After 8 months of testimony, it was over. The case went to the jury. Deliberations lasted only 4 hours. The world held its breath, awaiting a verdict that would send a seismic shock through the very heart of America. October 3, 1995. At 10 a.m. Pacific Time, America stopped. Over 150 million people, more than half the country, gathered around televisions. Flight schedules were adjusted. Trading floors fell silent. The verdict in the people of the state of California v. Orenthal James Simpson was moments away. In courtroom 103, the air was electric. Simpson, in a dark suit, clenched his jaw. The families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman sat in the front row, holding hands, bracing themselves. The prosecution and defense teams were rigid. After 265 days of trial, it would all come down to the answer to one question. Read by the jury Fuhrman, court clerk announced the verdict as, "In the matter of the people of the state of California v. Orenthal James Simpson, case number BAO 97211, we the jury in the above entitled action find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder." The second not guilty verdict for Ron Goldman's murder was almost an echo. O.J. Simpson was free. The reaction in the courtroom was a split screen of human emotion. Quiet triumph on one side, unfathomable grief on the other. The verdict didn't just end the trial. It exposed a deep national rift. For many in the black community, it was a rare victory against a distrusted police force. For many others, it was a shocking failure of the justice system for the victims. The debate was no longer just about guilt or innocence, but about race, privilege, and who the system works for. Fred Goldman heard to be saying, "This prosecution team did not lose today. I deeply believe this country lost today." Justice was not served. The criminal trial was over. O.J. Simpson walked away a free man. But for the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the fight was not over. In the American legal system, there is another path, a civil court, where the burden of proof is lower, where you don't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt, only a preponderance of the evidence. The Goldmans and the Browns were about to take O.J. Simpson to court one more time. And this time, the verdict would be starkly, unequivocally different. Legally, O.J. Simpson could not be tried again for murder. But in 1997, he faced a new trial, a civil wrongful death lawsuit filed by the families of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. The stakes were different, no prison time, only monetary damages. But the standard of proof was lower, not beyond a reasonable doubt, but more likely than not. Without the threat of incarceration, Simpson testified. His explanations were scrutinized. The defense could no longer rely solely on attacking the LAPD. They had to confront the evidence directly. And this time, the jury unsequestered, and with a different racial composition, saw things differently. The verdict was swift and unambiguous. The jury found O.J. Simpson liable and ordered him to pay $33.5 million in compensatory and punitive damages to the families. For Fred Goldman, it was a measure of accountability, a public declaration that, in the eyes of this court, Simpson was responsible for his son's death. Fred Goldman said, "It's a good day. It's not a great day, because I still can't hug my son. But it's a good day." O.J. Simpson lived the rest of his life under the shadow of the civil judgment, which he largely avoided paying. He faced legal troubles, culminating in a 2008 conviction for armed robbery, serving 9 years in prison. He died of cancer in April 2024. In 2025, a California court accepted a renewed claim from the Goldman family for $58 million against his estate, a symbolic victory. Though full payment remains unlikely. The legacy of this case is imprinted on American culture. It changed how trials are televised and how legal strategies are formed. It forced a national conversation about domestic violence, with Nicole's sister, Denise Brown, becoming a powerful advocate. It exposed profound fissures in perceptions of race and justice that still resonate today. And it left behind two enduring, haunting images: the bloody crime scene photos that spoke of two lives brutally ended, and the glove that didn't fit, a symbol of a justice system that, for many, ultimately failed. The trial of O.J. Simpson asked a nation to choose between two compelling, terrible narratives, one of a brutal double murder and one of a corrupt police frame-up. In the end, the court of public opinion remains forever in session, forever deliberating on the unanswered questions left behind on a walkway in Brentwood one quiet June night. What's your take on the verdict? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this documentary, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most infamous cases.